Good morning. Is this on, Derek? Good morning. Come on in and have a seat. I do want to remind everyone, if you have not signed in this morning, please do so between sessions. We have to make sure you put your little initials and do all that. I wanted to thank our sound, light, jazz music guys in the back, Derek and McKay, if we could give them a round of applause. They both work for the church, but they are great guys, and we've actually, Founders Frisco has used them quite a bit, and they are great, so they've been really accommodating. One thing I saw and heard yesterday was, I mostly heard positive comments because I'm just assuming if you have negative comments, you're probably not going to tell me to my face, and that's fine. There's a survey that's coming out next week, and we want your honest feedback from this. This is the first time we've done this. We hope to make this an annual event, and we want to know. I'm sure there are areas we could improve on, so I would like to do that. But one thing I heard was, I wish I could have gone to this, and even the chance today you're going to miss some. So what is awesome is that we as in Brooks McDonald, have created a YouTube video link where we're going to put every session and talk on. So you guys can listen to those throughout the year. Your headmasters can pull them and use them for professional development, or you can pull them for your own growth. We'll be getting that information out. I do really, really want to thank the presenters, because this is a lot, preparing for this while everybody's preparing to start the school year. So if you are one of the presenters who has done a session, will you please stand and we can thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I thought it would be kind of fun this morning to do a little share time before our first speaker comes up. So I have two live mics here, so I want somebody to be the brave. The first one is always the hardest to get up, and if you had an aha moment yesterday, or something really encouraged or inspired you, or you enjoyed or whatever, come on up to the mic, and we would all like to hear about it. So I'm going to start calling names if I cannot find someone. And the only people I mostly know are Frisco staff, so. So Palmer, you better get ready. Okay, Mr. List, there you go. Thank you. Okay, Mr. List, go ahead.
Got it, beautiful. Good morning. Josh Gibbs, beauty sits beyond the reach of usefulness. Ms. Richter was wonderful to share that among many other great nuggets of wisdom about the main focus was environment in the classroom and in the school itself, and how that can affect who we are.
I'm going to stop you right there. Can anybody else understand him? Or is that just me? I think it was hard. I don't know if the sound.
Okay.
Can you start again?
Sure.
Pull it away from your mouth a little bit.
I can do that.
Okay.
Microphone 101. All right. Is Josh Gibbs, beauty beyond the reach of usefulness? And I know it's my temptation as a teacher, as a human being, to only focus on things maybe that I see as very practical and useful, to have a utilitarian mindset about things in life, and forget that really the essence of the classical thinker, the classical teacher, is to recognize things for just the beauty that exists within them, and to help students come to find that love as well. So I appreciated Ms. Richter for sharing that as a part of her presentation. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Yes.
So I'd just like to make two small comments. The first one is Mr. Doty's presentation on parent-teacher relationships was amazing. It kind of reinforced some of the values that I had about parent-teacher relationships, and he did an excellent job presenting on that subject. even though I asked a question that made him rethink things, I think he did a great job in handling it well. And the second thing is that this is a great platform for networking, and the fact that we get to meet teachers and admin from other schools and just engage in conversation and get ideas and piggyback on thought. This is a great opportunity for that, and it allows for growth and just that positive feel that we all want to have before this school year starts.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much. That actually reminded me that lunches today, you'll be in the same rooms that you were yesterday. Today, they're boxed lunches, and everybody's lunch will be downstairs. They'll be labeled, so just grab your lunch, and then drinks will be upstairs and downstairs. So if you're upstairs, grab your box lunch and get your drink upstairs. Yes, next.
Yeah, so I've been really spending the summer trying to figure out how to put 7th grade and 8th grade English, this is my first year teaching 7th and 8th English, how to bring Socratic discussion into the classroom for that. And then I show up, and lo and behold, there's a session on teaching history and literature in a classical perspective that includes Socratic circles. There's a whole session on Socratic discussion. I think I have like 9 pages of notes that I went home and threw into a Word document to be able to bring into my classroom. And then on top of that, at lunch, being able to network and go to the other tables and talk to people about what does this look like in your classroom? How can I bring that into my classroom? And I think like the plans I had for the school year more or less doubled as I really was able to bring a lot of that into focus from both the sessions and like he had said, the networking as well.
Great, thank you so much. Yes.
Hey, this makes me really nervous, but I just wanted to thank Kim Brown for her presentation on Every Voice Counts, or everyone being heard. I think it's great for someone to take on what could be a difficult conversation about keeping every culture and religion and heritage in mind when teaching your class. So I really enjoyed that, and if anyone didn't see that one today, I encourage you to go to that one this afternoon.
Awesome, thanks, Lindy. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you so much. So it is a pleasure for me to introduce this morning's speaker. Mr. Mike Terry and I have worked together for almost 5 years now, and underneath his tough and serious exterior lies the heart of a marshmallow. So it's true. Over the years, I have seen his love for our students, his support and advocacy for our teachers, and his firm belief that what we do in classical education is redemptive, transformative, and is essential to forming people who will live good and virtuous lives and contribute greatly to their families and their communities. Mr. Terry is the superintendent of Founders Classical Academy. He earned a liberal arts degree from some tiny little school in Bryan, so hook 'em horns, in 1992. After working as a journalist, he studied communications theory at Wheaton College, earning an MA in 1996. His first teaching role was at Green Hill School, which is a private academy in Dallas. There he taught literature and journalism before entering school administration. After 13 years in private education, he moved to Uplift Education, where he focused on launching new schools. He has served as the Founders Superintendent for 5 years, during which the network has grown from 6 schools and 3,500 students to 17 campus and 10,000 students. My boss, I was going to say my friend, but that's weird to say my boss, my friend, so my boss, Mr. Terry.
I don't know if I can present after the marshmallow comment. I don't know, where's Brooks McDonald? Oh, she's back there. I'm just going to let you know now, I can't see the clock. And it's not because it's not in my line of sight. I forgot my glasses this morning, so I think there are people in this room. Where's Mr. Muniz? Where are you, sir? You made that remark when you came up to the podium about the question that challenged Mr. Doty to rethink. Listen, you're about to work with a bunch of terrific elementary school teachers. you're going to get so many questions that's going to cause you to rethink everything you think you know. Get ready, sir. They're coming for you. If you're a Corinth lower school teacher, go get them. I was thinking about, and I just need to connect this real quick, but I was thinking about Heather Brown's presentation from yesterday morning, and her comment, the overall theme of inspiring the moral imagination. And when I was a kid, and I had to do this web search. I haven't plugged. Are you coming for me? Oh, I just haven't plugged it in yet. I'm sorry. I'll do that now. Right in the middle of my story. Come on, you can do it. So disruptive. There we go. Actually relates to this picture. So I had to do a little web search last night because I was trying to remember this name of this weird little book I read in elementary school in the 70s. And it's called The Moon on the Water. And so Peter Falk has this line in The Princess Bride where he says, when I was a kid, TV was called books, he said. And that was my life. When I was, my mom was a teacher, and I only got to watch television when I went over to my grandmother's and had ice cream for breakfast and other things that made my mom angry. But as a kid, where we had a limited library in my school in St. Louis, the bookmobile would show up every week or two, and I'd go down there and get a stack of books. And so I read a lot because, well, there was no television. And I read so many little books that I couldn't remember. I couldn't tell you half of them. But there was one that always stuck out in my mind, and I had to go look it up because I couldn't remember the title. But it's a story about these carousel horses. And the carousel has been dismantled, and the wooden horses have been cast aside. And it gets weird because they come to life, and they run off, and they have this adventure. But the reason they're running off is because they're trying, now that they no longer have this purpose that was defined for them in this thing that just went round and round and never went anywhere, is they're trying to find a purpose for their own lives. And they're seeking freedom, they're seeking better lives for themselves. And it was just a sort of book that sticks in your head. And from that point forward, I just always had in the back of my mind that human freedom is important, but also that you're supposed to do something with it. And that was all. I mean, but that was, and no one was there to talk to me about it. No one was there to help me unpack these ideas. But still, those things stick in your head. I did actually look at Amazon last night to try to see if I could buy this book, and it was like $257, this little novel. I guess it's out of print. But it was interesting to me that this thing stuck in my head the way it did. And it has always been with me, comes back to me from time to time, this weird little story about these horses who want to be free. So we're going to talk a little bit this morning. This is a picture of Independence Hall from Philadelphia. And by the way, this momentous site is being replicated in Houston right now on the campus of Houston Baptist University. And according to Dr. Hammonds, who's the head of the Liberty and Law Center there, it's going to be called the Morris Center. He said it's an exact replica of the Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Well, no, he said it's not quite an exact replica because it's Texas, so it has to be a little bit bigger. That's what he told me. And so he said it's like 6 inches taller in the inside, just to make sure that people understand that this is Texas. But I think it's important that, and we'll look at the mission statement here in a second, that y'all understand that in that mission statement where we use these words, principles of a free society, or the phrase free society, that it means something. And it means something to you in your classroom. And we'll look at that here now, and then another teacher comes to mind as I was thinking through this topic. So I think it was Heather that went over the responsive ed mission statement yesterday. We have a very similar mission statement in Founders. It reads, Founders Classical Academies seeks to provide an excellent and distinctive classical education that pursues knowledge, promotes virtue, and prepares students to prosper in a free society. And again, I think it's critical that you're aware of, first, the formulation in our mission statement: knowledge, virtue, and liberty. Those are our pillars that drive us forward. And there'll be many opportunities for us, for your headmasters, for you as a team to talk about those words and unpack them and understand them. And that's not what we're going to do today. I'm going to focus on free society, that phrase at the end. Now, I do want to address the word prosper, because that in our view is not a monetary proposition. It doesn't mean that you are going to be full of money. What we're saying is that your students are going to be prepared to thrive, that your students are going to be prepared to reach their full potential, that they're going to be equipped with everything they need to have an impact on their societies and take full advantage of their time. So it's an important word. But today we're going to focus on free society. Now, before I get to this question, well, actually, let's go ahead and talk about it right now. So a few years ago at ATI, I had a teacher come up to me, and she asked me this question: is obedience a virtue? We've been talking a lot about virtue that day, and she wanted to know at lunchtime. I love you guys, because you don't care what my title is. You come up and you ask me questions all the time, and you often have an agenda, and she did. She wanted me to confirm to her that that obedience is a virtue. For those of you who were with us at ATI just a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Matthew Post from UD gave an excellent presentation on what is virtue. And one of the things that he said was that a virtue is always a virtue. Think about courage, the virtue of courage. It's always virtuous to have courage, because you are standing up for the good, even when everything is against you. So when she asked me this question, I went down my list of virtues in my head. I went through cardinal virtues, and then I went through the theological virtues and the intellectual, and I couldn't come up with obedience. I said, no, it is not. And she got a sour look on her face, because she wanted an answer, a particular answer. And in the end, we had to, she basically looked at me and said, well, we're going to agree to disagree, and then she turned around and walked away. So she was an interesting character. Now, I will acknowledge that in certain contexts, particularly related to things having to do with the Catholic Church and vows that are made, obedience in that context is considered a virtue. But it doesn't, as Brooks McDonald talked about, I think yesterday, it's not what we're going for in our classrooms. But then I started, I've been thinking about this for a long time, because the conversation really struck me. But I asked myself, well, what was she really trying to find out from me? What was she really asking? And this is what she was really trying to find out. How am I going to maintain order in my classroom? And that's certainly a thought that I know all of you have. And And in a way, I wish I'd had time for a longer conversation, although I sensed at the moment she didn't really want a longer conversation. She just wanted me to tell her that I was going to stand behind her no matter how harsh she might be with her students. You can kind of sense that when people ask that question a certain way. And that was a point that Brooks made in her presentation yesterday, that obedience is about an imbalance in the power structure, right? It's about a Lord and a subject, and that the subject is going to do, it's like parent-child relationship. At some point, the nature of that relationship has to change. But she wanted to know how she was going to manage her classroom. And in a way, our founding, not in a way, in a very real way, our founding fathers were asking the same question when they were thinking about this nascent country that they were trying to put together. How were they going to manage it? What were the principles upon which they were going to base the organization of their country? What were they trying to get at? And in a way, you ought to be thinking about the same things in your classrooms. What kind of community are you building in your classrooms? Now, James Madison, and it might have been Alexander Hamilton, it's not entirely clear which one of them wrote Federalist 51. He did acknowledge if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Your children aren't angels. You do have to maintain, no matter what their parents say, right? I got one of my own. I gotta be careful. I keep making comments like that, and this thing's being recorded, and one of these days my 15-year-old is going to watch these things, and he's going to say to me, "Dad, you're really hard on me in these public sessions. You need to stop that." And I'm like, "Well, you're 25 now, so yeah, you've survived." But at the moment, he's 15, and he's trying to find his purpose in life. And your children in your classrooms are doing something similar. They're trying to figure out what you expect of them, what their parents expect of them, what their peers expect of them. There's a lot going on. So I understand. I'm not discounting what this teacher asked me, because we have a destination every year and over 13 years. And we really want to get there. And, we need to do so in a collaborative, orderly way. But even with this comment, if men were angels, no government would be necessary, they were still trying to find the best way to organize their society that would be for the good of every individual person. And again, as you're dealing with this, you're probably, if you really step back and think about what you're trying to foster in your classroom, you're trying to do two things. You're trying to instill moral order in the individual and civic order in the room. And while you're not creating a whole society, you're still having to think about these things on a microcosm level. Now, when I say moral order, we're talking about your individual students. And I'm not going to spend much time on this morning, but again, since I brought it up, I just thought that I would point out what you're probably thinking about in terms of ordering the soul and ordering the mind of every one of your students, which you can think about things like courage and prudence and temperance and friendship, humility, patience, kindness, and self-discipline. All of these characteristics are things that you have to be thinking about. How do I foster these in my students? In terms of civic order, there's really, there's probably more than four, but as our founding fathers were trying to think through how they were going to organize society, and they're looking at history, they could have opted for chaos, basically done nothing and hoped it all worked out. They could have restored the crown as had been done in England after the Glorious Revolution in the 1690s. They could have allowed a tyrant to rise up to prioritize security over freedom. And they could have fostered a self-governing free society. Well, there's that there's that word in there, that phrase, free society. So you can probably imagine where I'm going with this. But these are all things, and I know when I get into this, and this is why I wanted to preface just unpacking this idea of a free society with the kinds of things you have to think through in your classroom, because where we're trying to go, what we're trying to prepare them for, does apply to you. And when you think about this journey our students are on from kindergarten to 12th grade, we're trying to get them to a place where they're self-governing, responsible individuals who are prepared to prosper. And there will be little things that you will do each year to take the power balance from you're in charge to maybe to a large extent they're in charge. Or maybe by the time we get to the end, it's not that they're in charge, but they're fully participating in the community that is our school. It's one of the things that when I go into classrooms in the high schools that I look for. Is it still sit and get? Or are they participating, whether it's a Socratic dialogue, or there's some other means by which they're actively engaged and involved in the instruction? And then does that priority extend out to the rest of the life of the school? Is it their school or is it our school? And when I say their school, it really should be something that they're invested in and that we're there with us. And that's actually the beauty of the virtue journey, is that while you should be mature adults and developed in terms of your character, you're not perfected yet. And so there's a certain equality also as your students do mature and develop their own self-discipline, their own ability to self-govern, and where you are in your lives. As they get older, they become more like us, hopefully. So self-governing free society is what our founding fathers opted for. Senator Robert Taft, who's the son of President Taft, said this: when I say liberty, I mean liberty of the individual to think his own thoughts and live his own life as he desires to think and live. So again, order is not principally about avoiding chaos. It's not about controlling people. Order needs to be about creating the conditions, and this is where you're thinking about in your classroom, creating the conditions where people can thrive, right? It's not just making sure that people are safe, and it's not just making sure that things are quiet and you're not disturbing the room next door, or the house next door, or the city next door. It's about creating the conditions under which people will thrive. And as the founding fathers were thinking about, well, how are we going to order our society? They had a history to draw from. There was a lot to read. There were societies to look at. I thought about spending more time here, the story of the four great cities, because it led our founding fathers to draw the conclusions that they drew. They had a great example on how to create a moral order from, generally speaking, the civilization surrounding Jerusalem. They had a great example for how to think rationally, and this idea that people should have a voice from Athens and the Greek city-states, who are, by the way, terrible examples on how to run democracies. City of Rome, this idea of citizenship that once attained that the individual had rights and that laws should be written down and applied to all citizens. Now, they had a very clear definition of what a citizen was and wasn't. A large percentage of the people in the Roman Empire had slave status, which meant all kinds of different things. Then we moved to London, and I was going to park here for a while, but I wanted to challenge all of our history teachers, our government teachers who are here, to make sure that you're talking about these issues and these historical periods with all of your teachers, because there's a lot to be derived from it. But from London, we get or England in general, we get the idea of the responsibility of leaders to the people. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. This idea of individual rights. A lot of people don't, if you haven't studied the history of these four great cities, a lot of people don't realize that England has a Bill of Rights. The 13 listed Bill of Rights, and it goes all the way back, that tradition, which John Locke spent a lot of time working on in exile, actually goes all the way back to the Magna Carta in 1215. And so from that period of time from 1215 on through the Glorious Revolution, the Long Parliament in the 1600s, led by Oliver Cromwell, to the reinstatement of the crown with William and Mary, who, by the way, there's a great picture, and I actually had it in here, of the coronation of William and Mary. And off to the side, there's a magistrate, and he's standing there with the sheet of paper. And the inference from that illustration is that before they could be enthroned, they had to agree to uphold these 13 stated rights in the bill. So all of this is, all these cities and these ideas are influencing our founders. And if you want to read more on this, I recommend Russell Kirk's book, The Roots of American Order. And that he tells this story in terms of these four great cities. And there's another book I'm going to recommend in a minute. Well, let's just do it now. So I've taken some slides out, and so I'm working on the flow here. But this other book is our Origins of Our Founding Principles, and this one very similar to Russell Kirk's approach. And it's you'll see the picture of Independence Hall on the front. And this is written and edited by our friends at Houston Baptist University. And their goal in their book is to elucidate these founding principles. And I'm going to go through them today. There's 6 of them that we'll cover, and then there's additional things I think you'll recognize in terms of elements of a free society. And again, this is a bit of a gloss. It's a summary for you all. My goal again today is just to help you understand this term free society and understand that there are core principles behind it that I subscribe to, that our founding fathers subscribed to and thought were essential so that each one of you could reach your full potential. All right, so I'm going to go through these and just give you a summary of these foundational principles of a free society. The first one, and this is a big one, and this is a conversation in and of itself, which I'm sure at some point Dr. Nason would be happy to come to the podium and tell us in great detail, maybe in a class over a period of 4 years, about the subject. But this is the idea that goes all the way back to Aristotle in its proto-form, that our rights are discernible by reason. That's the great Greek idea. And exists prior to the establishment of government. In short, our rights come before government. And that's something that we need to be filtering through as we're thinking about even contemporary issues. But our rights come before government. We have the freedom to determine how we are to use our thoughts, talents, and time. It goes back to Senator Taft's quote about liberty. We have the freedom to determine how we are to use our thoughts, talents, and time. And again, we're trying to engender this in our students so that by the time they go out on their own, this is part of who they are. The third one is limited government. Our government has limited, and again, this is an important concept for our founding fathers. Our government has limited rather than absolute powers and does not get to decide what those powers are. The people decide what those powers are. Popular sovereignty, I've already mentioned this. The government requires the consent of the people in a free society. Number 5 is the rule of law, that the law properly made, so just law, should apply to all people equally and properly enforced. You know, and you can probably easily on this one, you know, extrapolate that out to your own classrooms. You're thinking about, you know, how you're going to apply the expectations for all your students, and how you're going to work with them to make sure that they understand what the expectations are and that those are applied consistently in your classrooms and across your school. And it probably wouldn't surprise you that some schools struggle with this. Not necessarily our schools, because you all are wonderful, and you know you understand the importance of consistency. But schools do struggle with this, and students do get prejudged. From certain neighborhoods, from certain backgrounds, well, we can't expect as much from them. We need to make sure we are and we're working with them so that they can be successful as well. And then number 6 is equality. All people are treated the same in the eyes of the law. So these are 6 essential principles, but there are others as well that in a free society that we must uphold: free speech, free association. Now the Bill of Rights does talk about peacefully assembling. That's an important concept. But free association, assembly, property ownership, curbs on taxation, uncommon wars, involuntary servitude of all sorts is prohibited, and that self-defense is permissible. And a lot of these concepts are drawn out of natural law theory. George Washington warned us that government is not reason, it's not eloquence, it's force. Like a fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Never for a moment should be left to irresponsible action. What he's calling for, again, is personal responsibility. This is as we're working with our students over time, every year in, year out, we're working to help them become self-governing people. And making sure that when both in our classrooms and when they leave our schools, that they are going to take responsibility for themselves. George Washington and John Adams and James Madison and a number of our other founders believed that was an essential part of maintaining a free society, that people have to take responsibility for themselves. And he affirms this in this quote: "The foundation of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality," that moral order that we talked about, the preeminence of free government exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world. And Washington is basically saying when the citizens have a strong moral core, and the government allows them and agrees, those who are in government, to create the conditions where people can thrive, that idea spreads across the world. Now, I'm not necessarily on a mission to spread the idea of democracy from here to there. What I'm more interested, again, like you should be in your classrooms, is this idea of creating the conditions where our students, where our people will reach their full potential. So it's a little microcosm of the sort of society in which I want to live. So I can't, Brooks, are you back there? I can't see the clock. Looks like it's about a little after, around 10 after 9. I want to make sure as I conclude this short remark, and Melanie can come back up here and talk some more. Come on, Melanie, where are you? Come up here. She doesn't want to come up here. It's all right. I need to encourage you as even though this is a weighty topic, and I'm just scratching the surface on a lot of it, that you're thinking about this idea that in a free society with the right conditions, people are free to pursue the good, and that's the kind of classroom environment you were trying to create. And you need to be having conversations, no matter what your subject matter is, about what should that look like. Talking to your colleagues, your team leads, and your assistant headmasters and school leaders, what does this look like? And of course, it's going to take on different shades. I mean, Aristotle did say that students shouldn't speak until they've learned to self-govern. Now, I don't think he's saying that they should never utter a word, but before they can speak on weighty issues of the good, they need to be self-controlled. But we're not forcing them to do so out of obedience. As Brooke did say yesterday, if it's a matter of safety, we don't want, they need to know they can't go running out the doors and out into the streets. And you'll have students who will try to do things like that. And they need to obey when we give them directions related to safety. But that's not what we're going for ultimately. And so I want to encourage you to be having conversations again about what is this environment that you're creating in the classroom. Is it collegial? Is it cooperative? It's whole group instruction, but you're all going together, and I want to make sure that you're going in a way that will help our students love learning and love the growth that's going to happen in our schools. So happy to talk more with you all about this topic, and this is a sort of thing that I think it requires lots and lots of conversations. It requires thought about how you build culture on your campuses. It's conversations about how you create expectations for your students in your room. It's how you move through the halls of your school. It's about how you interact with your parents and what you're teaching them about the sort of environment we're creating. So I'm actually going to, at this point, leave it at the feet of all of our school leaders, all of our headmasters, to be thinking about these subjects and having these conversations with you. But I wanted to make sure that as we went through this conference and talking about our missions, that you understand that every word in our mission statement, including the term free society, has an important meaning. So, Melanie, come on up, and I will conclude at that point. I would love to do that, Melanie Sharpless.
Okay, guys, now is your chance. So if you have a question about this, founders, directors.
Michael Muniz, if you get up.
Yes, you need to go to time.
But yes, if you do, you come to the mic. Well, I appreciate that actually Melanie said any topic you want. Oh, here comes Jason Porch. He's even better than Mr. Muniz. My copy of the Roots of the American Order are in my bag, and if you ask me questions related to that, I'm probably just going to hand you that book, Mr. Porch.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your talk. Really appreciate it. It's always enjoyable to reflect upon these sorts of principles. I'd be curious, in a nation culture that's increasingly anti-founders, how do we deal with that? As we educate and as we seek to build up students and communities in both an actual historical Western founders.
He's giving me time to think of an answer here. I appreciate this.
Monuments,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Even constructing. It just doesn't seem like that sort of project would work anywhere, by and large, right? Reconstructing perhaps an edifice to slavery or something, right? How do we deal with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. He's asking me, in a society that's increasingly hostile to the founders as individuals, how do we deal with that, particularly considering that's the name of our school, most of them anyway. Mr. Porch, I think it comes down not to the people, but to the ideas that they stood for. Our founding fathers got a lot right. They got some things wrong. They thought some things would work themselves out over time. They were wrong about it. The last bill on slavery in a state to outlaw it was introduced in Massachusetts in the 1790s. That was the last time, which happened to be introduced by John Quincy Adams. And by the way, the Adamses were a great family to emulate. He was classically trained. Abigail was very interested in suffrage and was anti-slavery and was constantly encouraging her husband and son to advocate against it. And she was a great voice among the founding fathers, communicating regularly with Thomas Jefferson and trying to steer his ship a bit in a number of different directions. Encouraging reconciliation and other things that needed to happen among the founding fathers. But, Mr. Porch, to your point, I think that's why these principles that while I just mentioned them, are worth further study, because it's the principles that matter at the end of the day. I think there's plenty to learn from these men. I don't tend to put them up on a pedestal, but I also recognize that I'm standing on their shoulders. So I do have, for good and ill, for the hero and villain that's in all of us, I think it's important to explore the concepts that they stood for. I mean, you got to understand, at that time, no one was talking about these things in a meaningful way. They were inventing something new, and they were trying to create the conditions under which they would thrive. So hopefully that gets to your question, but it's always about the ideas. Okay, here he is. I hope there's some other, no, I give him a hard time, but he always does this to me. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Terry. Thank
Yes,
you so
good
much
morning.
for your presentation. I want to actually follow up with Mr. Porch's question with the topic of patriotism. And you mentioned the Adamses. Adams on his Peacefield farm said, a patriot lived here. That's the only thing he wanted to be remembered by.
I'm actually having a hard time understanding. Maybe it's just that one mic, but.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you fine. The words are a little muddy.
Sure. So on Peacefield Farm, John Adams had a signpost that said, "A patriot lived here." And to follow up with Mr. Porch's question, where does patriotism lie in the principles that you were discussing with us today?
Do me a favor, drop the mic and come over here and ask me that question again, because I can hear you talking about Peacefield Farm, which was John Adams' farm, and his signposts, but beyond that, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm just getting old. I'm sorry. I'm not. I promise. I'm not messing with you. No, really, I'm not. Here's the marshmallow. I really want to know what you had to say.
You were talking about patriotism. I want to know, where does patriotism fall as one of the principles that you were discussing earlier? The more we establish that microcosm in our classroom, are we not also instilling a sense of patriotism as well? And if so, is that either a virtue or a value given our paradigm?
Yeah, are we trying to establish patriotism? Is that a virtue or value? I think, well, patriotism, you got to define your terms, right? Always define your terms. And if you define your terms, patriotism as love of country, I think it's important to ask yourself, what are you loving? Are you loving a political process? Are you loving the military marching across the world doing its thing? are you loving the petrodollar system? What are you loving? If you're loving the principles on which our country was founded, that is a beacon that says, here's a path. It's not without its rocks, but here's a path forward. And you look around the world and you don't find it anywhere else. The way it's written out, the way it's described in great detail, and that's a product of our civilization and the fifth great city, which would be Philadelphia, then I would say that's worth loving. And that should be taught. But I don't want to teach love of country just for the sake of nationalism. I want to teach love of country because our country provides opportunity, or should, in theory, provide opportunity for every one of our children. That's what I want to love, and that's what I want to encourage. Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On obedience, what hit me was when you said this, and this is when you were answering a question, that there's a hero and villain in all of us. And
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, right.
Yes.
Yeah, and so with obedience, is it blind obedience, right? Is that, wanting that question, is obedience a virtue? So I was thinking about this, and I can't remember who said this. He said, morality is doing what is right regardless of what you are told. Obedience is doing what is told regardless what is right. And when you said the hero-villain thing, we have to make sure that when we want our kids to be obedient, that we're the hero and not the villain, I'm guessing. That's what I'm guessing right now with myself. I'm just arguing myself. Where am I in this situation? Do I want a child to obey me just blindly because he trusts me? Do I have, I need to be a person that is trustworthy. That's the problem. I think there's an echo.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
I think
that.
there's an echo.
Yeah. No, I can hear you clearly now.
Yeah. And so I don't know if there's a question, but I'm questioning myself now. When do I want obedience, and when do I want them just to, hey, hear me out? I don't know. So that's where I'm wrestling.
Yeah.
And thank you for making me wrestle right now. And that's all I got. I don't know if that's a question that you could answer. Or
Well, I can certainly respond. I appreciate that struggle. I mean, when you have this group of children in your class. Now, listen, I taught freshman lit in a school where the kids had been the top. It's a K-12 like our schools, where the kids had been at the top of the heap in 8th grade, and they moved over to the high school building and were now terrified. So I didn't really have to worry about obedience. My challenge was trying to get them to participate because they were scared to death about everything. I'm like, guys, you've been here for 9 years. What's the problem? And they're like, everybody's bigger than me. So and these ideas are big. But I think what we're looking for is cooperation and participation. Yeah, I think you used the word trust. I didn't see where you went. I think you used the word trust, and that's an important part of what we're trying to, of course, establish in our classrooms as well. When they trust you, they will listen to you, and their hearts will align with your heart. You don't have to order them. You just prompt them. If they're little. We've got some great K2 teachers in the room, and I see this all the time, where they don't have to bark orders because the children trust them, and they're waiting for that next guidepost to appear. Okay, children, now we're going to do this. Oh, good. And I remember this from the other day, and I did it well then too, so I'm going to do it well again. That's cooperation, that you're practicing day in and day out. Unfortunately, with COVID and lines on the floor and distances, we're just saying, you just got to do it. But again, that kind of falls into that safety category. But ultimately, it's trust and cooperation that we're looking for. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
It's always good to see you, Mr. Doty.
Nice to see you too, sir. I would like to take a left turn here and ask a question concerning today's agenda or today's philosophy of society and what's happening in today, in the 21st century.
Okay.
How do we take what we're teaching as educators, classical educators, and I don't know, the word infiltration comes to mind, but how do we take that knowledge and infuse it, feed it to what's happening to some of our students that are engaging in some of what's happening in culture today?
Yeah. I would probably, was Kimberly Brown, are you here? Are you, no, seriously, why are you laughing? I don't understand. I can't see anybody. Kimberly, wave your hand. Is she not here? Oh, there you are. I can see you now. Did you go to her presentation?
No, sir.
Go to her. Are you presenting again today? Go to her presentation, sir, and listen to her.
I will.
She had some, so I hear, and maybe I'll join you, but I hear she had some very important and wise words to say on this subject. But it comes down, first of all, we need to know our kids, and we need to know what they're dealing with in their lives. And we need to understand who they are, but also understand that these principles are for them too. And that if we want the best for them, what we're teaching in our classrooms has to be put in such a way that they understand it is for them, because it's for all people. But I'll tell you what time, Kimberly, are you presenting? 12:45? Okay, Mr. Doty, do you have a presentation that you're giving at 12:45?
No, sir.
Why don't you and I go to her presentation?
Yes, sir.
We'll sit next to each other and we'll see what she has to say on this topic, and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's not a punishment, by the way. But I think together we'll find out, what the answer to that question is. And okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Somebody's got to make sure I'm in that presentation at 12:45.
So this is kind of a question down a little different vein.
Yes.
I just finished reading Thomas Sowell's book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies, and was shocked a little bit to read some of the ways that they've been opposed in other states. I was just curious, here in Texas, kind of what Responsive Ed's journey has looked like.
Okay.
It seems very positive being an employee with y'all for several years. But I was curious if there are any ways that, as teachers in a charter school, that we could be advocating for them locally or within our state.
Okay, so do you want the history of Responsive Ed?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay, maybe a little bit. I guess I'm just trying for your thinking about your. Don't sit down yet, because I think you're gonna have to clarify. Because you asked a kind of a big question. I want to make sure I understand what you want to know. In reading his book, you understand that there are people who oppose school choice for parents.
Right, and I have known that.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to see the ways that it's been opposed and what
Right.
reasons and principles. And I know that in Texas, it's probably been a very different, more positive journey.
Yes.
But I was curious if there are any ways that we could be aware that we could be advocating for charter schools in general.
Yeah.
in Texas.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a great question. So, just for those of you who are new to Responsive Ed, and I'll just turn the clock back a little bit. The company was started in 1998. The first wave of charter laws were being passed around the country. They started in Minnesota, and I think it was in 96, came to Texas a year or two later. There was a group of charter applications that were submitted in 97, North Hills Prep, which is now part of Uplift, was one of those that was submitted and was awarded. The next year, Chuck Cook and Robert Davison, who had been working in a curriculum company had been joined by a number of superintendents, 2 or 3, I believe, and they decided that they were going to help students that were struggling in high school and were at risk of dropping out. So they submitted 15 charter applications the first year. Now we only have, I think it's 3 now. A lot have been consolidated, but 15. They got all of them, and they were all over the state. So Robert will tell this story about how he spent that summer running around the state trying to find places to put these schools that would eventually become our premier high schools. And back then, it was like, tell us what you want to do and go do it. Is basically was the mindset. Charter schools were supposed to be somewhat of a lab, free of a lot of the things that held schools back. And over time, the industry has matured. These no excuses charter schools like KIPP and IDEA, Yes Prep, Uplift, others came to our urban areas. I spent almost 3 years helping Uplift launch schools in downtown Dallas and Fort Worth and other high needs locations. What I've noticed, Brittany, over time, I don't know where you went because you're not Brittany. You've been replaced. This is funny. This is a fun game. Who am I looking at now? An interesting thing has happened though over time, and that's this kind of effort on the part of our legislature to legislate improvements in academic performance. You will feel somewhat of the effect of that this year as school starts with this new House bill that was passed addressing those children who have not hit approaches on the STAR, even though the scores this year didn't count in terms of grades. But I think for us, and founders in particular, because of this emphasis on liberty, on principles of a free society, I think we have the basic elements from an educational standpoint that will empower our citizenry in Texas. And when it comes to advocacy, telling our legislators, our representatives, whether it's at state level, I mean, they're the ones who can control the purse strings and the regulations that we're under, letting them know that if they want our state to prosper, that a knowledge-rich, virtue-based education that's focused on human liberty is what all of our students need. So Brittany, we can invite them into our campuses, and all headmasters, this actually is a priority of Mr. Cook and the company in making sure that our area legislators have been to our campuses and that we have relationships with them. I think that's a critical place to start. So that is a great question. One of the things and just kind of as a footnote to that particular point, lost my thought. But it is important that we're having these people come to our campuses, Brittany, and you can encourage Jennifer Richter to be reaching out. You can pester her about it. You can go knock on her door and tell her, when's he coming? Make sure that they're visiting Founders Frisco. But I think that's an important thing that needs to happen. Hello.
Hello.
Trying to remember to turn both ways.
No, I understand. Well, I know as you've changing gears a little bit, you've gone to many different campuses and you've seen all the different campuses. They all have a life of their own. They have different personalities. They even have different classes. While we're all meeting the same mission and vision for a Founders, what are the things that you're looking for to be fundamental and the same across all Founders locations? and then kind of sub from that specifically in the science departments?
Yeah, I'll defer. Well, first of all, on the science question, I want to make sure that in our science programs, and this is not going to be well thought out, and I apologize. Science is an area where we have a lot of work to do. But, I mean, ultimately, science is about discerning order, harmony in the world, the observable truths about our planet and about our universe that can be detected, and understanding those building blocks and how that works for its own sake, not for principally, not first and foremost, so that we can foster, a bunch of engineers or scientists of different shades. That's important and valuable, but that's a practical, pragmatic outcome. I'm more interested through the sciences, and this applies to math as well. But if you don't think you can find order in the world by solving a math problem, you need to do more math. But that's what I would expect for science. As far as our program, we do have a program. We do have a sequence, starting from kindergarten running through 12th grade. We do have a program guide that lays out our expectations in every subject area and every grade level from week to week. And the expectation is that our teachers are going to be following that program guide, because this is a journey that we're going on with a specific destination in terms of the kind of person that we're trying to foster. So when we say we have different classes, that's true to a certain extent. But if you read the program guide, you'll see that, no, it's actually pretty prescribed in terms of what our instructional expectations are. And as our schools are becoming, particularly if they're not launched immediately as founders and they're transitioning, that will become more and more evident over time.
Are there things outside of the classes and the program that you would want to see uniform across all founders?
Things outside the program. What are you thinking about?
Procedures, setup, things, the aesthetics, those type of things.
Well, there will be some. I mean, our schools need to be places our students take seriously. First of all, I mean that's really important. I've been talking to our headmasters a lot about our elementary schools and what we're putting before the children, both in the rooms and in our hallways. This practice of, and this is where we have to give an important nod to our art teachers, this practice of elaborating on the classroom instruction through art and then put out for all the children to see, I think is wonderful. When a third grader can walk down the hall and in an art display see what the fourth grade is studying about, say it's Egypt, I mean, it's powerful. And to be able to move through our schools and go really from year to year within your hallway and get a grasp of what our students are studying. I think that's important. That's an important aesthetic. That putting beautiful things before the students, rather than hastily written posters, we're putting artwork in front of them. I remember one time at Flower Mound when they were back at Parker Square. I was walking through the hall and a student had gone to the restroom and then had come back down the hall and was standing in front of a reproduction of the Mona Lisa. He was just standing there. But, no, he wasn't just standing there. He was doing this. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Her eyes follow me everywhere I go." I said, "Go to class." But he was taken in by this image in front of him, and that's what we want our students thinking about. They do see them. They do notice them. And I will say, as far as the classroom art goes, it's wonderful to be able to walk into a building with people who want to know what we're doing, and we walk around these hallways, and they can see what you're teaching without even entering your classrooms. I think that's fantastic. So there's a lot more to your question that I could speak on, but I know there's some other questions that we want to ask, but that'll give you a flavor of how I feel about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello.
Hello. I was debating on asking this question when I heard you say ninth grade literature. I thought I've got to go up. So, as I am a high school teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a 7th year parent of responsive ed,
Okay.
and I would like guidance and to hear what you would say to me as to how to bridge the gap in getting our students to move forward from middle school into high school, because it appears that after 8th grade, there is a bit of a drop, a loss in our clientele. So I would love to either hear you say, no, that's not correct,
Where are you? What school are you at?
Carrollton.
Okay.
Or as a teacher, instead of just saying, oh, there's a drop, as a teacher, how would you charge me to be a part of growing that and retaining our students?
Right. It's true and it's not true. We're seeing it at say, Founders Louisville. We don't tend to lose students. We're not seeing that, I don't believe, Melanie, we're not seeing that at Frisco. I don't know offhand at Flower Mound, but a lot of that has to do with creating. I think it is related to the instructional program to an extent. We had a funny problem at Leander, and if any of y'all from Leander are on, you'll probably recognize this. Dr. O'Toole and I used to talk about this. They did such a great job K through 8 that the parents were using that part of the school as a launching pad to top 10% at the public schools. So some of their loss was because we were doing our job so well that they were leaving because they wanted that automatic entrance into a Texas college. That's hard to compete with. I mean, you have to make it clear that the journey's not over, and if they don't finish it, they're going to be missing some things. They may get into that college that they want, but they're not going to be fully formed in the way their parents probably want them. But that's a hard thing to compete with. What we find in our schools where the students aren't leaving, it's because their connections to the community are so strong. They don't care. And also their parents see them doing well, and they want them to stay. And by the way, this isn't a Leander problem. It's a problem we all face. It just so happens that in the Leander ISD, it was easy to jump from Founders Leander into that ISD in SOAR. That's a hard thing to compete with. But we need to be building an extended community outside of our classroom that our students don't want to leave.
And what you said, I've never verbalized, but I know of a student who came through 8th grade and is currently second in his class out of about 600. And so, particularly to that student, just the reiteration of why stop a good thing? You can see the results. Why would you not want to finish them? Is that kind of the buy-in?
Yeah, and over time, so this student will get automatic admission, but frankly, if he's performing at that level, even with us, he's going to get into a college of his choice. A lot of families are driven by the scholarship money that come along with it, and we don't have a strong track record yet. We have lots and lots of students getting scholarships, but across the board, we haven't had the time to prove that if you stay with us, you're going to get all those benefits that you think you're going to derive from a public school and so much more. And that's important for us to be working on. Carrollton is a young school from a K-12 perspective. We have a lot of work to do, Kayla Bear, wherever you are, to prove to the families that we're going to deliver on the commitments that we're making. And we have to point to our other schools. Fortunately, we have quite a few other schools. And we have to convince the parents to stay with us, because when you look at the program in general, this program that Dr. Moore charted at Ridgeview in Colorado and has been applied all across this country and is successful. We in schools like yours, this is growing out to a K-12, we need time. Hi, Allison.
Good morning, Mr. Terry. Okay, so I had the privilege of sitting in on Mr. Porch's Classical Education 101, if I'm getting the name of his speech right yesterday. Is that correct?
Yes, he was wrong on many of his points.
He was not wrong on
And there'll be other debates later between him and Dr. Moore over them.
Well, anyway, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very
No,
much.
I'm teasing. Rousseau, I think, was the sticking point between them. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Please ask your question.
Yes, okay. So
I enjoy the podium. I'm sorry.
So I'm finding a lot of our questions this morning in a roundabout way, whether we're seeing it at the surface level or not, they root back to that class. So I wanted to give a plug for that. I'm in my 10th year of classical education with experience in outside of that 10 years in public, working in director as a learning center, homeschooling my children, and then 10 years with classical. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, but it's so layered and it's so deep, and we can never continue being lifelong learners ourselves and polishing our understanding of that. And so that draw for students to stay, or for patriotism, or for classroom management, and we could go on and how classical, those different components and layers answer all of those questions. So we ourselves are in a lot of transitions across our schools, moving from one school name to another. What would you recommend? Because I think in my own personal life, I found it highly valuable to continue to deepen my understanding at the grammar, dialectic, rhetoric, and again, those can overflow into the elementary, middle, and high school, depending on the content area. What do you recommend for our audience today to not just take a look at one particular piece, but to really grab a hold of something and for they themselves to know and love classical,
Right.
so that all of those other pieces begin to fall into place?
I think that's a great question, Allison. Thank you for asking it. I think it's multifaceted, as you mentioned, with the layers, but I think that the two key things is you have to know what we're trying to accomplish. First of all, what is this angle? What does this student look like when they graduate from our schools? All the headmasters in the room need to be casting that vision. So we all know together, whether we're a kindergarten teacher or 12th grade teacher, and by the way, if your school has a graduation and you're not going to it, you need to be there. For all the years the 13 years I was in private school, no matter when, and again, I taught high school, so it was a little easier for me, because I knew them now as they were graduating. But every one of you has had a huge impact on every one of those graduates. It's not just their story; it's your story too. I go to 3 or 4 graduations every year, and that number keeps growing. And I have to, they happen at the same time, and so I can't get to them all. But I love them, and my role typically at graduations is to just certify them. So all the speeches have happened, all the awards have been given. I get up. And all I have to do is read a script that basically says, on behalf of Responsive Ed and the State Board of Education, I certify these students having completed all the requirements for the diplomas and the requirements by responsive ed and the state, that they qualify. But when I get up to do that, I mean, I'm always overcome because I think about what we're laboring every day for, and there they are, sitting right in front of us. And sometimes I'll just stand there and I'll just look at them, and I can kind of like, they're like, what's he doing? I'm taking you in is what I'm doing because you're the culmination of our work. Y'all need to understand that as a teacher. If you're wondering, that's number one. Number two is know your content. Know how to ask questions about it. I think that those two things, I can't even remember who asked me the question anymore. Oh, Allison did. Yeah, Allison. I think those are two important things. Know where you're going and know your content. Help your teachers, Allison, know their content. And that's a big burden for you because as a school administrator, it's hard to know all the content in every grade, but you need to know your program guide so that you can guide them. But those are the two main observations that I'll make. Hang on one sec before Brooks or Melanie, how are we doing on time? That sounds great. Am I doing okay? All right, fill in the time okay? Love the questions. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Terry.
Good morning.
My name is Tara Payne, and I just had a question. What are your thoughts of the importance of the fine arts in classical training, specifically like orchestra, band, choir, theater, and stuff like that?
Okay. Well, I've already hinted at it, but I think that this is a vital part of the development of the soul to recognize beauty, which is a thing in harmony with its purpose. It's what I think the arts do for us. They help us see things in harmony with their purpose. And that's a very general answer, but every school should have a robust performing arts 2D and 3D art program. Now, it's going to take on different shapes and forms, right? Because it's largely based on who we're able to hire. We're going to hear from Frisco's, I don't know if it's our middle schoolers or our high schoolers who will be performing today, but our two music teachers there are phenomenal.
Yes, and I got to speak with Wes, who's from Frisco.
Yes.
Yesterday, which he was informing me, which I had no idea, but his program alone has like 200 plus students in it, which is awesome for an orchestra, band program, or whatever. And so it made me start thinking of, and I've already been thinking, I've been in responsive ed because of my children since 2012. I've been teaching after-school lessons, what was then Vista Academy, and then it started to become a part-time, and then now a full-time. This is my 6th or 5th year full-time, now Founders Classical Academy. But just the growth of the programs, the size of the actual rooms themselves, and stuff sometimes are not accommodating for some of the schools. And so I did teach in a public school for 3 years before I became a mom and all that. And anyway, so it's just the growth. It's sometimes hard we're competing against the public schools because they do have the school instruments in their facilities, which makes it hard for, as an orchestra teacher, to sometimes keep the students, in the program.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think it's of paramount importance, and we can talk about the impact on brain development of artistic expression, but remember, we're also studying art and music theory, art and music history. We're understanding how people have expressed themselves over the centuries, not just in Western civilization, but across the world. This is to me, it's an essential part their formation. My son is, and I told him, he's been taking piano lessons since he was 4 years old. And I said, look, as long as you're living in my house, you're going to play that piano. And fortunately, he's pretty good at it, so he doesn't grouse too much. But I do think it's important that there are manifestations of art and music programs in our schools. If we can't get in a particular location a great strings teacher, well, it may be a choral program. But it has to be a part of our schools. It's part of the classical, the Western educational tradition, and it will continue to have a presence in our schools. But it may take on different forms.
Mr. Moore's going to be your last question.
All right. Make it good.
Hi, Colton Moore. I teach Latin and literature at
Yes, sir.
This goes to the heart of your talk.
Yes.
You define liberty by using Senator Robert Taft. You say that liberty is essentially to think one's own thoughts and to live one's own life as he desires to think and live. And so my question is, if men are not angels, as I think it was Madison you quoted, and if men sometimes desire to live in ways that are harmful and destructive to themselves and to the community that the government is seeking to prosper, then are men always then free to live as they desire to think and live?
Well, I mean, no matter what you do, you can never stop a person from thinking. I mean, that's just a reality. They can try. I'm not advocating for an anarchist civilization. Now, that's different from chaos. In an anarchist civilization, it's governed by consent. Nothing happens unless there's agreement between two parties. I think that the Greeks would say that a democratic civilization above 5,000 people doesn't work. And there has to be, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like that's a pretty wise observation. So, I think my point is that, we want to try to foster those conditions under which people can thrive. But I'm not talking about libertinism where they just do whatever they want. That's why we constantly talk about personal responsibility and self-governance. We do have to understand that our actions affect others. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we can talk more about it offline if you have more nuance that you want from relation to your question.
Yeah, he's going to talk to you more about it later.
Not at 12:45, he's not.
Not at 12:45, because you're at Kimberly Brown's session. Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you, Mr. Terry, so much.
Thank you.
And y'all have about 15 minutes to grab coffee or whatever, go to the restroom and get to your first session. Thanks.